This is the return of Arthaus after 2.5 weeks of being in the abyss. And we're back with a guest, CK Eternity. And you might be like, who's this guy, right? He kind of looks like Grim Hood, but he's not Grim Hood. And he talks about the same stuff that Grim Hood does. But I can assure you he's a very different person. He's his own unique, sovereign individual. And he's here to drop some knowledge on a part of our body that is so vitally important to basically everything that we do in reality and in just our lives, but we never really talk about it. So can you drop some more info, Mr. CK, on the importance of the mitochondria?
Yeah, so essentially, the mitochondria, as pretty much everyone has heard at this point, is the powerhouse of the human cell. It's what we use to make energy in our body. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is that cells actually most of the time have more than one mitochondria. The average is like a few hundred. Some have as many as multiple thousand. And there's only a handful of cells in the body that don't have any. So when you focus on mitochondrial health, it's a big difference from focusing on the health of an individual cell. A lot of mitochondria working together are powering a single cell versus it takes a lot more it's a lot easier for cells to function well. Whereas mitochondria, if one goes wrong, then it starts to kind of derail the entire process. You need mitochondrial health for proper cellular health, and then from there it goes up all the way to gene expression and organ function, and pretty much everything in the body is dependent on this.
What is when a mitochondria is not functioning properly? What are some of the symptoms, some of the things that happen to the body?
There's actually an estimate. It's by one of the biggest researchers in the field, Doug Wallace, and he says that up to 80% of the diseases that we see are actually a result of mitochondrial dysfunction. So it can be literally everything. The biggest thing you're going to see is low energy. That's pretty much like the basic starting point, but that can manifest in a lot of ways. One thing that a lot of people don't really think about is that obesity and heart disease and things like that, while it may seem like you have too much energy, we think of obesity especially as like, oh, you're eating too much carbs or sugar or something like that. Your body should have an abundance of energy and it's storing it. Actually, it's much more likely that you don't have enough, that you're not producing the energy efficiently, so you're storing the carbs as fat. So there's pretty much a ton of things that can manifest this way. Cancer is another one too that is a big issue.
Really? Cancer?
Yeah, a lot of research is showing at this point that there's a genetic component to cancer, but a ton of it is environmental factors. Like the whole cure for cancer thing, most of that is going to be preventative when we really start working towards it. But if there is a cure, I think it's going to be more on the mitochondrial level. We're looking at the cellular genetics right now, and it's not really adding up to anything.
How does the mitochondria impact, the whole body processes? How does it function and relate to all the different organs in our body and, cause us to become, superhumans through proper nutrition and proper energy production and stuff like that?
Yeah. So essentially mitochondria kind of have two big things that you need to focus on for optimal function. You want to be producing the correct amount of energy, and that's going to have some regulatory effects on what's called apoptosis, which is programmed cell death essentially. So mitochondria kind of govern whether a cell lives or dies, and lack of apoptosis actually results in cancer because cells are supposed to die off at regular intervals so they can be replaced by new cells. And then on the other hand, you also want to be constantly regenerating mitochondria. So you want to essentially be regenerating mitochondria, and every now and then you kill off the whole cell and replace that. So you have mitochondrial biogenesis and just like cell recycling that eventually adds up to organs functioning correctly. Without that, you end up with like tumors, or sometimes simpler things, like you may have just like even mental health issues can be a result of this. Like you can have reduced gene expression that is correlated with things like autism
Mm.
or just general mental illness. A lot of those show like low gene expression on an epigenetic level, which is essentially like whether or not genes are active.
Mm-hmm.
So it can
Gotcha.
turn your genetics off in a bad way.
Somebody hears this and they think, "Damn, I need to make sure my mitochondria are functioning properly." What are some things that they can do and some things that they can keep in mind with diet, with exercise, with overall lifestyle to make sure that, their cells are dying off properly and they're storing and using their energy, as it should be.
Yeah. So essentially, to simplify it, I kind of put it into three categories. The first thing you really want to focus on, and this is probably the most important, is sunlight. Sunlight is essentially the driver of mitochondrial function in a huge way, and we don't think about it, but the research essentially shows that your mitochondria can actually store energy almost like a battery. And you want to have a good store of energy. And the form that this is in isn't in fat or sugar or anything like that. It's actually in the form of electrons. Because on the most basic level, mitochondria are running on electrons. They're
Mhm.
essentially like electrically powered.
We're electric
Um,
beings.
yeah, and we're also beings of light. But we'll get into that a little bit more later. It's really fascinating. So essentially, your mitochondria are constantly running an electric current over them, and it runs it through what's called the electron transport chain, which is what makes ATP. So when it does this, you need a stable current of electrons, which means you need the cell to be constantly negative and to have a constant supply of this. You don't want the pH to be off because that's going to impact that. And you want a constant stream of electrons, and you can use protons as well. They power kind of the other half of the system.
Mhm.
And one thing that we've kind of realized recently, when plants photosynthesize, light hits the water and the water is split off into protons and electrons, and then those are funneled through a similar process to the mitochondria. We kind of think of photosynthesis as just being plants, and we don't do it, but we do kind of a more advanced version of that process. When light hits water in our bodies, it actually still splits off into electrons and protons as well. And that's what our mitochondria run on. So this is happening all over your body all the time, essentially. But sunlight is going to do it the strongest because sunlight actually contains infrared light.
Mhm.
Artificial light has most of the light spectrum removed to make it more energy efficient because it takes less electricity to produce just a tiny fraction of the full spectrum that is sunlight.
Mhm.
So essentially, you want constant light exposure that's going to fuel your mitochondria, and then it has all these other effects as well, like melatonin production and circadian rhythm. All of that is pretty much the core of your health, and it regulates all your neurotransmitters and
Well,
hormones.
that shows why, if I mean, you've felt this probably. It's days where you've had to been inside all day doing work or something like that, and you just at the
Yeah,
end of the day you just feel awful. You just feel like unused and just gross. Like you haven't used your body, and then you have the days where you're outside all day and you come back, you're happy, you're high energy, you sleep like a baby perfectly. You wake up the next day with super just a love for life. It really does. Just going out in the sun, the most basic human. It's not. I don't even want to call it a life hack. I just want to call it just living. Just the most basic part of living. Going outside
yeah.
is just
I
it
feel like
fixes so many problems.
yeah, I feel like people don't acknowledge it for the beneficial thing that it is because everyone's like, "Oh, that's too simple." Everyone wants almost like the more complicated solution.
Yeah.
When really, like, I tell people 2/3 of your health is light and like other stuff I'm going to get to here in a second, the other two categories. And then only a third of just long life and good health is what you eat. And
Yeah.
everyone wants to focus on like, oh, am I getting this tiny, tiny micronutrient, or am I getting enough of this? That stuff is important. I'm not discounting that, but your environment is more important.
Right.
The next thing that's really important for mitochondrial health is actually water. And this is another one where it's like too simple, you know?
Mhm.
People don't really think about it, but
People
your
people
level of
want what I've noticed is that people really want the crazy high end, like super complicated answer, and then it gives them kind of the mental cushion, be like, oh, that's too complicated, too hard. Now I don't have to do that to fix my life because they see sunlight and water, like, oh, that's I could be doing that right now, but it's too easy. There has to be something else.
Yeah, and then we've also kind of been led to think of everything as like, oh, I need to take something for this, like a pill or
Hmm.
like an easy fix. So when someone's like, there's a supplement for that, then it's a lot easier than saying, oh, you need to go and change how your entire day is scheduled so you're outside all the time.
Hmm.
That's a
Yeah,
lot more work, honestly, but it's also like the simplest thing you can do. You know, it doesn't cost anything.
yeah, exactly. It's
But
free.
yeah, with the water, um, essentially water acts as the cushion for all of the electrons. When you don't have enough water, there's not enough electrons. And this also kind of ties into nutrients a little bit because most of the nutrients in your body are soluble in water. So when you're dehydrated, those aren't penetrating any cell as well. Like on any level, like your organs aren't going to be getting the proper nutrition all the way through. You know, you're kind of just losing it halfway. But on top of that, there's this really brilliant guy named Gerald Pollack who has been really kind of bringing to light some new research on how water works. And what he's found is essentially that when water comes in contact with certain surfaces, surfaces that don't repel it specifically, surfaces that like kind of pull it closer, hydrophilic surfaces, this is essentially like the entire cell lining. So when water comes in contact with cells or similar material, it forms a kind of structure. It almost looks like a honeycomb if you were to visualize it, but it forms on multiple levels. And the structure gives it kind of like a gel-like property. And the biggest thing is that it makes it negative. So remember that negative currents and negative charge is what mitochondria run on. This water forms along the mitochondria and along the cell wall, and it pulls those electrons that the mitochondria need. So this is formed by the cells in your body and infrared light. So sunlight again, and just making sure that you have enough water to fuel this process.
Now, with when it comes to the water, what is this? Are we talking regular tap water, or do we want specific water? Do we want pH balanced water, electrolyte, spring water? What are some things that people can do with their water to make it more, more charged?
So there's a couple different things. A lot of them are things you want to avoid. There hasn't been any research on fluoride and how it affects the electronegativity, but fluoride is it has 7 out of the 8 valence electrons in its outer shell. So essentially, it's like a magnet for electrons. It wants to fill out that outer shell very powerfully compared to other things that only have like a handful of their full outer shell. So what that means essentially is it's going to pull electrons out of the environment. So you want fluoride out of your water, and then there's other things that you should just avoid anyway, like the xenoestrogens and the heavy metals and things like that that you're going to get from tap
Yeah.
water. So tap water is pretty much at the bottom of the water food chain, so to speak. Um,
The
above
water
that,
tier list.
yeah, exactly. So above that, you're going to have things like distilled water that are really pure, but they aren't like the best. If you
Mhm.
can get good spring water, that's all right. You want to kind of avoid bottled water so you can get it filtered. That's a lot better than some other things. You really want to filter your own water, have it fluoride free and xenoestrogen free. The best kind of cover all bases way that I've found in my own research is a charcoal filter. Sometimes you need a fluoride attachment for them, so it can be a little bit pricey, but it's definitely worth it. And then if you want to charge your water up, actually, you can put it in the sun, or you can do different things. I've heard juice has more electronegativity in it. I haven't checked this out myself, but normally I'm kind of against juice, but I think that having like a little bit of plant matter in it, you know, like if you've ever had cucumber water or something like that, may be an interesting way to do this.
I heard about
And then there's some really
chlorophyll too. There's some like
yeah,
chlorophyll water that kind of it. I just kind of read the label. I didn't really do any deep research on it, but it's like, hydrates you more than normal water and whatnot. Is there anything on that you've read or noted?
that's probably based on that essentially. My guess would be that the fluoride or the chlorophyll pulls in more electrons. That's actually like how it works in the plant matrix. So I think that that's a little bit like it as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's also some other things you can do, like you can spiral your water, like vortex it, and then you can add. There's like hydrogen ion water, which is supposed to be beneficial, but again, I haven't really had experience with it myself. I really
Mm-hmm.
stick to the basics, which is just kind of filtered.
Mm-hmm. You'll
But
probably
yeah,
get
really,
most of the benefits from that.
yeah, really, you just want to load up on it more than anything. I think the average amount that humans need is like 12 cups of water per day, which would be like 3 to 4 liters, something in there. And you really want to go a little bit above that. So you got to be drinking it throughout the day, essentially. And like
Yeah.
if you're sweating, if you like go to the sauna or you're outside in the heat, then that you got to replenish that too. That's your natural detox process.
That begs the question too, like how many issues that we have are just because of dehydration, and we don't realize we're dehydrated because you know, we've lived like that for our whole life, and we just think that's normal, but we don't know like, oh, we could be way more hydrated.
Oh yeah. One thing I really recommend people try is like write down the amount of water that you drink, and like there's like different programs online where you can calculate how much you need based on your weight and height and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Compare the two and make sure you're getting like at least a cup or two over your recommended amount per day, and do that for a week, just a week. You'll feel amazing. Like it's a world of difference. And most people don't realize that they're deficient in water. We should treat it as a nutrient, but like water deficiency is rampant.
Mm-hmm. Now, yeah, you said so. We have sunlight, we have water, and what's the third aspect of proper mitochondrial health?
The third is kind of an interesting one. It's actually electromagnetic field, or just electromagnetic energy in general. We kind of are told this is a bad thing a lot, but really there's good and there's bad EMF. We'll go over the good first. That's essentially the Earth's natural magnetic field. We're
Mm-hmm.
really adapted to the Earth's field. I don't know if you're familiar with the Schumann resonance.
I
The
am. It's like 7.83 hertz or something like that, and it's
yeah, something
the
like that. But
grounding one.
yeah, it's essentially what the Earth vibrates at, and there's actually like a really neuroplastic state in the brain, which is just like a really mentally beneficial state that is induced and vibrates at that exact frequency. So our brains literally are designed to sync up with the Earth. And on top of that, when sunlight hits the Earth, it puts off electrons. As we were talking about, electrons are pure mitochondria fuel, and they keep your body negatively charged. So there's benefits of people walking barefoot on the Earth or laying down on the Earth. Um, Essentially, this stuff lowers inflammation immediately. It reduces all these negative health markers. And we really should be experiencing that state daily. Walk barefoot on the earth daily, or just spend some time outside.
Mhm.
Like don't wear your shoes all the time. You're cutting yourself off from something that's really beneficial.
Now, I'm going to take an average city dweller right now, right? Wakes up early, groggy, mad, immediately gets into thick, clunky dress shoes, gets into his car immediately, no sunlight, sees sunlight for 4 seconds when he gets out of his car and walks into his office, shoes on the whole time, dehydrated the whole time, eating processed food the whole time, in with Wi-Fi and computers everywhere, comes home, goes to sleep staring at his phone, same thing every day. Not an optimal way to live by any means, super disconnected from the earth.
Exactly, yeah, and it's completely unnatural. Like if you look at this, all of these diseases that we see have only appeared within the last 100 years or less,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. And if you look a little bit over 100 years ago, we invented artificial light. A little bit more recent than that, we started putting fluoride in our water. A
Mm-hmm.
little bit more recent than that, our food went to shit. It's been a really gradual process, but it really has just been this progressive decline. And we're just sitting here wondering, like, where did we go wrong? It's everything, but it's also really simple stuff.
Yeah. And it could be fixed pretty quickly looking at it, because it's not like huge, massive, complicated things. It's just like they're just putting fluoride in the water. They're just putting toxins in the food. Just don't do the things that are causing the health issues, and everything's fixed.
Yeah, it's all things that we don't want to change because we're already doing them, and there's a lot of money invested in it. Like the whole 5G issue. Like, I understand 5G is really bad, but 4G is just as bad. And 1G, 2G, and 3G all have research on them showing definitively that they promote cancerous growth. So we've had this really since the beginning, and I feel like it's just getting worse. It's not like, oh, there's some cutoff where we got to stop now, we got to protest it now that 5G is a thing. Some countries actually have banned it, but they should have banned it at 1G or 2G. We should have just had the lowest possible level of EMF, and we just keep adding to it.
Yeah.
And they haven't tested the levels in years, honestly.
Yeah.
It's a huge issue.
It's a shame. Yeah. Really is a shame. And we got a question from the audience. Whiteboy9921 says, there's so many people who literally just drink fizzy drinks. Wall. Okay, I guess it's not really a question, but I guess the essence of that is like soda, right? A lot of people drink soda instead of water. And what's sort of the what's the issue with that? Drinking high sugar, high sodium drinks instead of just water as your primary drink of choice.
Essentially, there's something called the Coca-Cola conspiracy, which is Coke and other soft drinks. It applies to all of them, really. They all follow the same game plan. They are essentially designed to dehydrate you and really make you addicted to them.
Mm-hmm.
They actually have as much salt. I've heard it compared to drinking a pizza. The amount of sodium in them is ridiculous. So the sodium is designed to make you thirstier and thirstier, but at the same time, they make it so you'll never catch up to that because caffeine is a diuretic, which means it not only makes you pee a lot, but it also drains the water out of your tissues to fuel that. It just flushes you out.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're replacing your water with caffeine, then it's with caffeinated water that also has a lot of sugar in it. It's going to be really addictive, but essentially it's like an uphill battle. You'll never get hydrated on soda.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just, everyone does it, it's really, really commonplace. You see kids drinking it and it's really like crack.
I mean,
it's really not much different.
Every time I think about soda, because I haven't had soda seriously in like 2 years after I just kind of realized, like, what am I drinking? What is this?
Yeah.
But it really, for people that aren't conspiracy theorists, just look at soda. It is so, the whole industry is so perfectly designed to make a product that's so unhealthy, so purely toxic, yet so purposefully manufactured to be addictive as fuck. It's ridiculous.
Yep. And they keep putting more salt in it and they keep putting more sugar in it.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Let's keep on that for a sec. Is there, just in your experience, is there an alternative for soda that's obviously not as sugary, but still you kind of get the fizz, you kind of get the taste from it?
You can put Alka-Seltzer in water, and you can put like different micronutrients in it. Like you can put magnesium and things like that in your water and dissolve them, and you can kind of make your own like carbonated mineral water. I really don't recommend the sugar, but like if you need that to get off soda, then anything's better than that. And you can put in like a little bit of fruit juice. As long as you have juice with a meal, it's shown to be a little bit better in the research than like on its own.
I think there's a market right there. There's a market for fizzy water with like magnesium and some minerals in it that also just has a little bit of a fruit essence, and there you go. Perfect.
Yeah, like squeeze the lemon or something in there. It's super easy.
Or some
do it on their own too.
Yeah, there's a company, there's a soda here. I'm in California, and I think it's a local company. It's called Olipop, and it's basically this. They basically have like a root beer, and they have a fountain soda one, and basically it's like 30 calories, and it's just like a bunch of different roots, and there's some probiotics in there, and it really does taste about like 85% of the way there with root beer. It's pretty good. They almost got it. It's really good alternative.
That does sound amazing, honestly.
Yeah, man.
Like, I'm
Well,
all for teas and things like that.
so before we have to close out the cast, let's throw a couple action steps at people right now listening to this. So, what are some things that they can do just right now? I know you gave those 3 categories beforehand, but what are some specific steps that they can take to get more hydrated and power up their mitochondria and reach a new level of ascension?
Yeah. So it's really not as hard as you'd think, honestly. Like the first thing I'd say, track your water, like I mentioned earlier, just for at least a week. Go
Mhm.
through and write down how much water you're getting throughout the day. And if you need to do it beyond that, just because you feel better and want to maintain it, then I highly recommend that. A similar thing I really recommend to a lot of people is tracking your nutrition too. This is kind of aside from what we were talking about, but there are a lot of nutrients, especially like thiamine, that play into mitochondrial function a lot. Like thiamine and magnesium are 2 of the biggest nutrients for proper mitochondrial function.
Mm-hmm.
And you really want to just track everything because it all works together in the body. But I use an app called Chronometer for it. You don't have to do it all the time, but again, just do it for like a week or 2, and you'll notice a difference if you make sure that like all of your nutrition is at 100% of what it's supposed to be.
Right.
Another thing I'd say is just avoid EMF. We didn't really get into the negative effects of EMF, but the biggest things are it dehydrates you and it acts as a direct blocker to the electron transport chain.
Mm.
So you really want to not, if your phone's in your pocket, you want it on airplane mode. If you're using a computer, then have it kind of out of the way or not sitting on your lap, not sitting directly on your person. You really want to keep this stuff away from you as much as possible. And if you can kind of get where you're living a little bit further away from other people, like right now, I live in an apartment complex
Mm.
where I can turn on my phone and I can get like 10 different people's Wi Fi. That's bombarding me all the time. And I
Mm.
really can't wait till I can get in a situation where that's not the case. It
Right.
sometimes takes years to improve this kind of thing, but
Yeah.
it's definitely worth it in the long run. I'd rather have to pay a little bit more to live a little bit out of the country or something like that than to have a degenerative disease long term that's gonna
Right.
cost me a fortune in medical bills.
Right. But I mean, like you said, if you can keep that water up, you can keep your nutrition up, you can get sunlight, probably the effects of EMF aren't going to hit you that hard, and you can stave off the potential downsides until you can move out and get somewhere else that's
Yeah, exactly.
more in tune with nature.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 more things. So
Yeah.
essentially, the other thing I'd recommend, you got to entrain your circadian rhythm daily. It doesn't even have to be you don't have to spend the whole time out in the sun. But what you really need to do is as soon as you wake up, get outside and get some sunlight in your eye and on your skin. So whatever that means, take off your clothes, like just run outside and spend, I don't know, 10 minutes, half an hour outside in the sun and make sure it actually gets into your eye. Like when I go outside and I do this, I take off my glasses because glass blocks part of the light frequency. You want to do it without sunglasses and things like
I've
that too.
noticed that. I just did that, like, cause I wear glasses and contacts and whatnot. And when I go out there with my glasses, I look up and I like do my little like sun staring thing. I realize like this is not as effective. I don't feel it.
Yeah,
And then I take out
it
my
really
glasses.
is.
Immediately, it's just like shocking me right in the eyes. It's great.
And you were talking about how you sleep better after you spend the day out in the sun earlier too.
Yeah.
That's You're actually designed to be high on sunlight. Like
Hmm.
when you get sunlight directly into your eye, especially, but also all over your skin, it is actually wired to regenerate your dopamine receptors and release endorphins,
Hmm.
which are pretty much the axis of pleasure in your body.
Yeah.
So it's designed to feel amazing. Um, but the last thing that I would recommend for health, and this is kind of something that I don't talk about as much, but really it's one of pretty much the most important food choice you can make based on what I've been researching recently, is eating a lot of seafood. And the reason for that is actually the omega-3 fat DHA. It's found in the highest amount in salmon, but shellfish and other fish are really good too. Even like freshwater fish are still going to contain omega-3s. But
Mhm.
DHA is found in the highest quantities in your brain and in your eye. And
Mm.
essentially, it's something that needs to be constantly replenished because cell waste, like free radicals, sunlight, EMF, all of this stuff is going to break down DHA. And this is what your brain and your eyes are essentially composed of. And it's all over your body too. It oxidizes DHA into a compound called carboxyethylpyrrole, or CEP.
Mhm.
CEP is really only beneficial in the body if it's present in wounds. It works in wound healing, but the rest of the time, if you have high levels of CEP in your brain or body, it's actually a marker of cancer. And they use it as a
Mm.
metric to determine your risk or if there's something going on there. And in the eye, there's a similar metric where the higher your levels of CEP, the more risk you have, or the stronger the case that you have of macular degeneration, or essentially like going blind or having cataracts.
Mhm. Well, when you can find a cure to myopia and heal my freaking destroyed eyes, I will.
There actually is one. Yeah, there's essentially, I
Gimme,
posted a
gimme,
text a while back, but I'll send it to you after this.
gimme, 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 gimme.
Essentially, you want to gradually taper down your prescription strength, and the main issue with it, um,
Okay, kind of makes sense.
blue or artificial light oxidizes the DHA in your eye, and it causes essentially something that's normally anti-inflammatory to become inflammatory. Same effect in your brain from all kinds of stuff. But the blue light, normally you have protective melatonin that's formed when you perceive red light or full spectrum sunlight.
Mhm.
So when you're lacking that, like when you spend time inside or you spend a lot of your day looking at a screen, which is pretty much everyone at this point, like it's not anything unique. Everyone's going to wear glasses at some point if we don't figure out how to stop this. But you want to really replenish your seafood, and you want to take breaks regularly or wear blue blocking glasses.
Mhm.
And then spending time out in the sunlight also helps with this, and you just gradually taper down your prescription strength. The text that I shared actually has like a taper plan,
Oh,
and
perfect.
I'll make sure to retweet it after this if people want to go to my feed,
I'm
read
definitely
it.
gonna retweet that because that sounds banger as hell. Sounds so
Yeah,
good.
it's
I'm
called
gonna.
the
I'm
No
trying to
BS
think.
Guide to Vision, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. That's a freaking e-course you can bust out for $9,000 right
Yeah,
there.
free though.
There we go. Yeah, he's just giving away free value right there. CK Eternity just dropping gems on mitochondria. Guys, this was an amazing cast. I learned a lot, and clearly right there with the myopia thing, I'm gonna start trying some of this stuff right when this cast is over. But before we end, I just like to say everybody that donates helps out this cast a lot. Hugely thankful for everyone that's given money to this thing. This is a passion project. I love having people like him on, and every cent that you guys give really powers me to keep making more of these, and it allows me to invest more into this thing, because every cent that I have right now for this show is going right back into the show. It's going right back into servers, going right back into, different production methods, and getting ways that I can expand this show and release just more and more content for you guys. So if you enjoy what we're doing here, please consider donating at the Gumroad link in my Twitter bio. This has been CK Eternity on Arthaus. Fantastic cast. CK, do you have anything you have to say before we head out?
Drink water, get out in the sun today. That's pretty much it.
Drink water, get out of the damn sun. We'll see you guys later.